Live. Okay.
I believe we are almost live. We're live.
We're live.
I believe we're live. Yay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first, not first virtual event of the year, but one that celebrates the beginning of a new year. We're really excited to have community member Raynel Puzzle with us tonight, who is going to talk about the Celestial Bear and kind of the start of the Mohican New Year. We're super excited about that. If you were with us last year, he did this presentation in person, but because of the pandemic, we have moved to virtual viewing of that. If you have any questions for Rainer while after his presentation, please put them in the comments below. I will monitor our social media and we will get those questions to Rainer and hopefully he can answer them for you. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I am going to turn off my video and audio and let Rainer go ahead and take over. So Rainer actually was he's a community member, but then he also worked in our historic preservation department last year with us before he went off to school in Milwaukee, where he is studying public health and getting his master's degree. So we're super excited about Rainer and his journey that he's going on. But tonight he's going to share a little bit of history, a little bit of Mohican New Year, and I know 2021 was off to a rough start, so you can use tonight to start your year again. So thank you so much for joining us, Rainer, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Heather. So tonight actually is the beginning of the Mohican New Year. I always start my New Year's resolutions today instead of the first because I'm just not ready to start eating good and exercising on the first of the year. So the Mohican New Year is on the first new moon of the month of January, and tonight we have a full moon. And so in Mohican, Oskai Kuten means New Year. Oskai means new, and a Kuten is a year. And so a lot of people don't know about the Mohican New Year. Hopefully from my talk last year, and it's been in the newspaper, Mohican News, quite a few times. Like Dorothy Davids used to write about it. I think Sean Stevens put an article in there as well. That we actually have our own New Year ceremony and a New Year cycle similar to other tribes. A lot of other Eastern tribes have a similar New Year. I know Oneida has their midwinter ceremonies, and theirs is on a full moon, and ours is on the new moon. So theirs is a little bit after ours. But so how do we know about the New Year? So there was actually a group of Munsees, Delawares, and Mohicans that ended up in the Six Nations Reserve in Ontario. So I'm sure a lot of people already know that there's Munsees in Moravian Town, and there's another Munsee Reserve kind of by London area. But there's actually was a few families that went to the Six Nation Reserve with the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, and they moved into the allotment with the Cayuga, who are closely related to the Oneida. So it's like a history that I didn't know about before. So it was really interesting to me that there was actually some Mohicans when they were fleeing, they left New York and went right to Six Nations, which is kind of outside of Toronto area. And they were a group of traditionalists. So there was a lot of Delaware, Munsee, and that were Christianized. The other two reserves in Canada were Christianized, like Stockbridge were. But this was a small group of people who were traditionalists. And in the 30s, there was an anthropologist who went to record the story of the New Year's, the Great Bear ceremony, from a few people who practiced it. And so it was from two gentlemen, informants, and one's name was Nakatchet. His English name was Nicodemus Peters, and Peters is also a name that we have in our tribe here in Stockbridge. So there's like a lot of names that we have here that are also in Canada. So Nakatchet was Munsee for Tame Little One, and he's one of the main informants of the New Year Bear ceremony, and he learned from a few traditional older members in the Six Nation Reserve as a child. So it kind of was, the ceremony was on its way out already when the Catchet was a kid. So next. And the next informant was Josiah Montour, known as Hook Swiss, which means little snake in Muncie. And I think it's the same in Mohican. And then let me pull this up. So he was a descendant of a Mohican woman named Shopsy, and she actually grew up in the Hudson River Valley in New York, but fled to Canada with other bands of Indians. They were known as the Wakowiak, or transformed people, because they mixed in with the Cayuga there in Canada. So, and the word Wakowakiwak means kind of like twisted or braided, like a tree, and that's where the word comes from. So we actually have, based on the account of Mr. Montour and the Catchet, we have a ceremonial calendar, which is, there's not this one holiday. We have the New Year, which they called Wiske Katan. So the dialect that they used, it's very different from Muncie and very different from Mohican. And because it was such a small group of people, the two languages kind of blended together. So Wiske Katan means January in their dialects. And I won't get into too much of that right now because I'm going to talk about that later. But there was also other ceremonies. One in March. It was called Mohoka Kiko. Kiko is like a month, and this means starving moon. Um, Late in the spring, there's not a lot of food around. So on the new phase of the moon in March, just before the maple sap began to run, the chief called a meeting in the big house. I'll talk about the big house later, about like what it is. And they prayed in the big house for a good sap season. So the maple sugar dance was performed for part of the day and until midnight. And a hoop and post game was played between teams of different men from different sides of the big house, which I'll also get into um, later. But the two sides were Wapanaki and Lenape. So the Stockbridge called themselves Wapanaki, which means like Easterners, and the Lenape or the Munsee were considered the West because they were to the west of the river. And they gave out maple sugar cakes and sticks with maple taffy given to attendees. And a men's dance was performed at night, and a man or woman blessed with a vision were asked to share it, and a short sermon by the chief was given to close the ceremony. So then we have Akiheo Kiko, which means planting moon. And then in Mohican, it's called Akea, but in this dialect, it's called Akiheo. So this is the new moon phase of May. A lot of the ceremonial holidays happen to run on the new moon because they kind of use it for timing, which I'll also get into later. And the planting ceremony was performed in the big house during Akiheo Kiko. So then we have Kuitehin Kiko, our strawberry moon. And this is when the moon waxed full. So it was the full moon in June, which was kind of different from the other holidays where it was a new moon where you couldn't see it. And on that day until midnight, was devoted to the Strawberry Dance Festival. It started in the afternoon with a prayer that the chief gave for a good strawberry crop and to the season be blessed with a lot of strawberry juice. Apparently, that takes a lot of strawberries to make juice. So I want to know where their patch was. So strawberry juice was given to attendees by the chief near the center post of the big house. And the chief also threw wampum beads on the floor, and children were allowed to pick them up. And this kind of was simulating turkeys picking berries or foraging for berries. And it also taught the children to be fast berry pickers. So the ceremony ended with a recital of a vision and a sermon by the chief. So then we have in August the Swaskimikwan Kiko, which means corn beginning to ripen moon. So it's the new moon in September and lasted 7 days and 7 nights. It's second in importance to the New Year ceremony, which would start today or tonight actually. And it signifies the end of the growing season and beginning of the hunting season. It was opened by a prayer from the chief on the first day and began with men dancing around the center post in a cornhusk mass. Several dances were performed and it culminated or ended in women handing out corn cakes to the men as they exited the big house. And on the last day of ceremony, that's when the cakes were handed out. So then finally in fall, there was Pil Sohalaweo, which kind of meaning a cleansing. And from what Nakache told, it wasn't really celebrated too much anymore, and they stopped celebrating it later on. But it was held in people's houses, and they would celebrate hunting basically, and by the killing of a bear, and later a pig was used instead of a bear. So I'm going to talk about the big house. So I presented this last year, and this is like one little tidbit that I missed about the history of the big house. So it was once said that the Wapanaki or the Mohican and the Lenape were once enemies, and the Wapanaki lived in the east and the Lenape in the west. And they decided that they needed to stop fighting and stay together. So the longhouse of the Wapanaki and the Lenape were joined into one big house. This was the symbolic joining of two peoples in one house. And I think that's very like peculiar because they kind of like parted ways. The Munsee lived down by New York and the Mohicans up in the upper Hudson. And we're back together again after all these years later, right? So it's something that I was like, wow. So there was an agreement where the tribe occupied, one tribe occupied each end of the big house with an imaginary line dividing the east and the west. And the imaginary line is either, they don't know it's the Hudson River or the Delaware River. But that was kind of the dividing line. And basically the structure, the architecture of the big house has like a lot of symbolism and geography and also like positions of the stars within the big house, which I think is really cool. The Wapanaki or Mohicans occupied the east end of the house and the Delaware occupied the west. And each had a separate fire in the house. So there was two fire pits inside of the big house. So here's kind of a diagram. So men sat on the west side, women sat on the east side. And then here's the two fire pits. And then the singers sat in the middle, and there was a chief bench, a bench for sweepers. They had brooms, and they would sweep after the ceremony to get bad spirits or bad luck out. And then there was a bench for magical men or people who gave the visions and told them aloud to the community. And then there was a center post, and they had masks on them. So there was a red mask on the east side and also on the west door, and there was a white mask on the west side of the post, but also on the east door. So this is kind of a cool picture. This one's actually from Oklahoma. They used to do big house ceremonies down there too. And you can kind of see the center post with two fireplace. The sweepers are over there by the door. And then women on one side and men on the other side. So remember me saying about the mask being on the center post and also the doors. So there was actually a reason why they put the mask into the big house because there's a story behind it. And a long time ago in the Hudson Valley territory of the Mohican and Munsee, they were traveling in the mountains. They were under a spiritual ban caused by their wickedness and failure to worship the Creator. So misery and unhappiness oppressed the people. And once they were traveling through a narrow pass between the mountains, they suddenly saw a stone face outlined in the cliffs above them. They took it as a sign from the Creator that they had been neglectful in worshiping Him. They then realized that this face was the face of the Creator. They then carved the Creator's face in wood and placed him on the east and west sides of the center post in the big house. So this mask in the picture is actually the Wapanaki mask or the Mohican white mask that represented the east. So then we're getting more into, I'm switching into the significance of the bear. So in the New Year ceremony, there was a sacrifice of a bear. So people are probably wondering, well, what's so important about the bear? So the layout of the big house is a projection of the stars onto the earth, specifically of the Great Bear constellation or the Big Dipper. So before kind of the ladle part of the Big Dipper, they said those four stars were the bear, and the handle were three hunters who were chasing it. And I'll tell the story in a little bit. So a ceremony was conducted every year to renew the relationship between the earth people and the sky people. And bears were thought to be immortal because if they were hunted in the proper manner, our ancestors said dead bears would reappear as cubs in the dens next spring. So bears were thought to be immortal and to kind of have this spiritual power where they were able to communicate with the earth and the heavens. So the movement of the Big Dipper across the night sky represents the life cycle of the bear from waking in his den in the spring until his death in the fall. And the constellation actually kind of moves in the same pattern. So the bear ceremony was started due to a vision given to the tribe that they must sacrifice a bear for a New Year feast. And there's a story in the book Celestial Bear Comes Down to Earth. I kind of want to keep it brief, so if we have time, I'll tell the story later. So this is the story of the Great Bear. And remember me saying that the four stars made up the bear and the hunters. So here's a nice little picture about how they viewed the Big Dipper, not as a spoon, but instead a bear and the hunters. So in the spring, the Great Bear emerges from his den. Upon awakening, he is chased by three hunters through the sky. The chase continues on through the summer until the fall when the bear is wounded and his blood falls to earth and the colors of leaves of the trees red. In the winter, the hunters boil the bear down and renders fat, which falls to the ground as snow. In the spring, the snow melts and rises in the trees as sap. So here's kind of a diagram about how the Big Dipper changes throughout the year. So right now, it's kind of just right above the tree line. So when the bear emerges from the den just above the tree line, and then the new moon, that's when they knew it was time to begin the New Year's ceremony. So in the winter, the bear is getting out of his den. In the spring, he's on the run. On the summer, he's still on the run. And then in the fall, he's wounded. And then he dies, and then he goes beneath the tree line, which is really cool. And this one you can't see beneath the tree line, but if you're up on the res, you can't see, if you look north, the Big Dipper will just be kind of over the tree line a little bit. And then in the fall, it goes beneath the tree line. So I have a star map. Heather, can you see the star map?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I had a cool app last year. This one is still pretty cool. It's not as nice as the other one, but you can search the constellation. So it's called Ursa Major in English. And I have it set for Bowler. So it's this kind, if you look straight north, it'll be right above the tree line. It also follows the North Star. So that's where it is right now. And then there's another story about 10 boys who became stars, and that is the constellation Pleiades, which I'll tell us that story later. And Pleiades is over here, and they used to use this to time planting. So it would time frost when the frost ended in the planting season. So I'm going to get into like the the details of the ceremony, just kind of giving an overview of what happened, how they did it, not anything too specific like songs or anything like that. So on the day of the ceremony, 12 men would go out looking for a bear in places that they had saw their visions. So the men would kind of dream before the New Year's, and then they would use their dreams to find and locate the bear. So they would wake up the bear and ask him, "Come down, the chief wants your body." So then the men would chase him into the big house, and at the center post, which kind of represents a tree that connects the earth to the heavens, the chief would kill him by a blow to the head with an axe, and then deliver a sermon afterwards. So then, after the chief asked the bear to inform the sky spirits that everything on earth was okay and that humans were faithful in their obligations to each other and the spirits of the dead. So the bear's body was then taken out of the east door and into a cookhouse that kind of was set outside the big house, and he was prepared for the feast, which would kind of happen later on in the evening. And then the meat would be given out kind of throughout the rest of the ceremony, which actually lasted like 10 to 12 days. And so the bear hide was dried and hung on the center post from the year before. So the new bear hide was replaced with hide from the newly sacrificed bear. Okay, sorry. So the ceremony followed the timing of the moon. So tonight's a new moon. And for the first 5 nights, the chief began his sermon before the moon was above the treetops. So tonight, they wouldn't see it, but they knew to start tonight because there was no moon. But even like tomorrow, you can kind of see like a little smidge of moon. So as soon as it appeared, the ceremony was ended for the night. So the first 5 nights, the moon was dark, and this is when the sermons took place. In the last 5 days, the moon was near half, and this is when singing and dancing took place. So on the last night of sermons, on the fourth day, the rest of the bear was served out, and his bones were burned in the east fire. So on days 5 to 8, when the moon was almost to half phase, half full, which began the recitation of dreams and visions by spiritual men. And then also singers would then recite the dreams in the song after the spiritual men told their dreams or visions. So then a men's dance was performed, followed by the mixed dance, meaning men and women, and then the women's dance. And so these three dances were performed every night from the 5th night to the 8th night as they could fulfill the wishes of the creator, they were thought. So other dances could be chose until dawn from days 5 to 8 until the celebrations ended. And it's very complex, right? There's a lot of, it's 10 days, every day kind of has a different schedule. So there was a lot that went into this, but it was kind of the most extravagant and biggest holiday of the year. Like we have Christmas now, this was like the Christmas for Mohican and Muncie people. So on days 8 to 10, the moon waxed from half to full, and the sacred instruments like the rattles and drums were removed from the big house. They used the high drum and certain types of turtle rattles and drumming sticks, and they were taken out. So on these nights, the robin dance, the raccoon dance, the false face dance, which means the mask dance, the mask hanging over the doors, the Wapanaki and Lenape mask. And then afterwards, there were social dances like the round dance and ceremonial games. And on the concluding day of the ceremony, on the 10th day, the Nighthawk dance was performed. And just before dawn, the last of the bear was to be served. And when everyone had finished eating, the chief sent everyone home. And so apparently the Nighthawk is one of the most important dances. And that's why they performed it on the end day. So I'm going to tell a story This is Pleiades. Remember the constellation that I put into the Starfinder? And the Oneidas call these the Seven Sisters, but we call them the boys who ascended the sky. So the story was recited by Nakachet, and he said that 20 Yuccas, who was a Delaware woman, she told the chief about the time of the new moon when we celebrate the feast. Oops, wrong story. Sorry. So here we go. I got it. Sorry about that. So long ago, there were 10 young men who wished to acquire greater spiritual power. They went to a great man of spiritual power for aid. He took them to an island in the river, a large island covered with forest. Where was it? Back in old country where people lived along the Delaware River. There on the island, they built a sleeping camp and prepared to stay by themselves until he came to take them off. They were to remain without food except for what they gave him. Each evening, the medicine man went in his canoe to the island, bringing only a little round cake of cornbread for each young man. He had provided a sharpened stick for each one of them and had them stand in a row on the shore facing the river. There he tossed the cake of cornbread to each one in turn, beginning at one end, and told each to catch the cake on his sharp stick. Only when any of them would be allowed to eat his portion. But each evening he returned with his corn cakes for none of the boys could. He returned with his corn cakes back to the village because none of the boys could spear the bread on their stick. On the 10th day, however, the first boy whom he tossed the cake impaled it on his stick. Then the successful boy began to rise in the air towards the sky, singing a medicine song. The next one now caught his and began also to rise. The third the same, and so on, until all 10 had done the same. And there they were, sailing off into the sky, singing as they rose from sight as night came down. Then they became stars and are now to be seen at night, the boys who went up from Earth. So this is the Pleiades constellation, and like the Great Bear, the Big Dipper, it's also used for timing of planting, and the Great Bear was used for timing of the New Year's ceremony. How am I looking for time, Heather?
You're doing good. You can keep going if you want.
Okay. So then I will tell the story about kind of the vision. So the Delaware lady, she had a vision originally of why we should have the bear ceremony. So 20 Yuccas, who was the Delaware lady, apparently this was a common vision that many people had, but this is kind of the last account that they have from this lady named 20 Yuccas, and she lived in Oklahoma. But Nakachet said that people from our tribe in also in Canada had kind of received the same vision, but she was the person that could remember the story. 20 Yuccas had a dream. Then she told the chief about the time of the new moon when we celebrate the feast. I know where the bear is living, so you can call these young men to go bring the bear. The chief then went and brought Makok. The chief told Makok, 12 men will go with you, all 12 men of the big house. Then 20 Yuccas told Makok, very near daybreak you will reach there. Then you will see a little creek which runs by. And then the tree standing there is an oak. A little hole will be visible. Then a bear's nose will appear through the hole the bear's nose will appear as though it comes out of the hole, pushed through, his nose icy about the edge. Do not bring him. That is not a good one. It is a smooth bear. You will go on down past him. Then you will see an elm tree leaning toward the east. Then you will look up. You will see a hole. That's the bear's home. Then you cannot come back. There, accordingly, you have to stay all night. Standing by that tree and stand around there. You hit that tree standing up with your bow and 3 times hit it again. Tell the bear, I found you. Then nothing will be hurt. Then also as you hit that tree 3 times, tell the bear, I found you. Then they heard him moving about. Once more the tree was hit. He told them, we have found you. All the men looked upward. All saw the bear's head sticking out. Then Makok told the bear, come down, the chief wants your body. Then the bear climbed down. The bear came down to the ground and let his head hang down on the ground. Surely like a dog, he was ashamed of something, Makok told the bear. The chief wants your body. Then he told the bear to turn around. The bear turned around and Makok told the bear, that's enough. He told him, now you go on ahead and take the lead. The bear went on ahead. Then these men came behind him. They reached a little creek. The bear laid down beside the creek. Makok told him, what's wrong? Get up. The bear did not move. Then Makok told the men, let me see, the bear will come to the big house. Makok appointed one man and he told him, so you will tell the chief that the bear refuses to come. You will go there yourself. Then the chief came. Makok told him, the bear will not come to the big house, so no one will be able to feast or dance. Therefore, you will have to kill the bear right here beside the creek. Then the chief told the bear, right here, I'm going to have to kill you. We want your body for the big house. The bear got up. His head was still hanging down on the ground and his eyes were closed. The chief hit him. Then he died. He never even kicked. All the men skinned him, and then Makok picked up the bear skin. He gave it to the chief. The chief then told these men, now we will go to the big house. You men carry the bear. With the dead bear, you will take the lead. You will come behind. Then they reached the big house. They went into the big house to the middle of the building. They lowered the bear onto the ground. The chief then untied the old bear hide and put the new bear hide down onto the post. The chief told the woman and appointed one man, you cut up the bear, help these women in the cooking. Then the chief stood up in the center of the house. Therefore, indeed, we are thankful, all of us, that God should help us. All of us people, we should help one another. We should not steal, and do not steal your brother's wife. Then all of us people came into the big house. A new moon elevated as high as the treetops and went down. The chief then stood right in the middle of the floor of the big house and talked to these people. He told them, all be good to one another. Do not cheat one's living companions. The moon then went down. The chief told them, go home. Don't be trifling. Be good to one another. So that kind of was the original story or vision of why we do the bear ceremony. So it was kind of to renew things and make sure that the tribe was in good graces with people in the heavens. And that's all I have for you guys today. It kind of sucks that we couldn't do it in person because last year we got to take everyone out and look for the Big Dipper. We also lit lanterns to kind of send prayers up to the heavens to our ancestors to be symbolic of the ceremony. But we had to do things a little different this year, but I'm glad to have presented on it. And I hope one day maybe we can do this again because it sounds like a cool, like fun ceremony. And I know Clifton Peacock has a big house, so maybe one day we can get a tour. What do you think, Heather?
I think maybe we could. I think if we ask really nicely, I think we could. I thought, again, wish we could have done this in person because last year it was just so beautiful when we lit the lanterns and they all went up. Like that was really awesome, and I know we had such a great turnout. If you have any questions, please go ahead, post them in the comments now. But Rainer, I actually had a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One related to the big house with you said the women sat on the east side and the men sat on the west side. Was there a reason for that?
They didn't know in particular, but they think that so white represents kind of kindness and women are kind, and red represents war. So red is associated with the west and white the east. So women sat in the east because they're peaceful and men warlike. or what I was thinking is that I don't know if this is true, but the sun is kind of, or the day starts in the east. It's born in the east, and women are kind of the creators of life. So maybe they sit in the east door.
Oh, that kind of makes sense actually, now that I think about that. That's really good. Is this do you know if other Native nations have a similar tradition to starting the new year? I know you mentioned the Oneida. They start it on the full moon instead of the new moon. So, do you know of any other nations that might do the same, something similar?
Specifically the New Year ceremony, not really. Other in particular, the even though the like the Iroquois, they're kind of linguistically like they speak a very different language from us. They actually have a lot in common with like the ceremonial calendar. So like the Oneida and Cayuga calendars are like almost the same as our ceremonial calendar, and they have different names and different dates. But a lot of the same dances are performed, like the raccoon dance, the robin dance. The Cayugas still do those, I think. So
Okay, and then one more question from me. So we are Stockbridge Muncie, so we are Mohican and we are Muncie. Would this particular telling of the new year, would it have been similar or the same in the Lenape culture? Are there differences? Would Mohican and Lenape be different, or would they've been very, very similar?
this specific recital, or like the interview from Nakachik and Joseph Montour, they were Mohican and Muncie. So they said that a lot of they might have been different to begin with, but when they practiced it, it was kind of like a fusion or blending of the two cultures. But I almost say I don't think there would be very much difference in how they conducted it. So they were Muncie, like we're Muncie, and they were Mohican. But I know that the Delaware and Oklahoma do the same ceremony, except theirs is ran a little differently because um, people sit in different places, so they kind of sit by clans. But our tribes were too small to keep our clans, and we just didn't have enough people to do that seating, so they just divided it, men and women.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. We just had someone comment, a viewer comment said, yes, Haudenosaunee have midwinter ceremonies, similar ideas are there. So good to know that as well. We didn't have any other questions. We had a lot of thank yous in our feed for you presenting the Mohican New Year to us. And hopefully, next year we can do it in person. But if you have any questions that you think of later, please put them in the comments and we can get them to Rainer, or we can get them answered for you and have them, posted on our Facebook. This video will also stay on our Facebook, so you can, if you didn't have time to watch it tonight, you can go back and watch it later. But I just wanted to say a great big Anishik and Onewe to Rainer for joining us tonight. And I would like to wish you a happy new year, Rainer, and thank you so much.
For sure. And Happy New Year Mohican is Haoyan. Um,
Hao-Yin?
Haoyan means like happy or like season's greetings. It literally means Merry Christmas, but you can use it as like like happy holidays type of thing. So Haoyan Oskai Kutun.
Hao-Yin, Oskai, what?
Kutun.
Kitten. Okay, all right. I'm learning along with everyone else. And on that note, if you would like to join our language classes, we have Muncie that's held virtually at 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Mondays, and Mohican is held 5:30 Central Time on Wednesdays. So, and they're all virtual, so you can just shoot us your email and we can get you signed up for those. But again, Onewe and Nishik Rainer, and thank you so much for being part of our virtual programming this evening.
Anyway, thanks. Bye.